Ladies and gentlemen, friends, fellow rationalists, atheists, humanists, secularists, and free thinkers. I stand before you today not merely as a writer, but merely as a woman in exile, not merely as a recipient of an award, but as a witness to what happens when reason confronts blind faith, a witness to what happens when a woman dares to question religious authority, a witness to the cost of truth in a world that prefers obedience. To receive recognition from a rationalist organization in Kerala is profoundly meaningful to me. Kerala is not just another place on the map. Kerala is a land where ideas have dared to challenge gods. A land where social reformers fought caste, superstition, and religious tyranny long before it became fashionable to speak of human rights. A land where rationalism has not been a drawing room philosophy, but a lifetime of struggle. Rationalism here was not born in comfort. It was born in conflict. It was born in resistance to caste oppression, to religious dominance, to the lie that inequality is divinely ordained. That is why I feel at home among you, not geographically, but intellectually and morally. I thank the Kerala Juktibadi Sangam for this honor. I do not see it as an award for past work. I see it as a challenge, a demand that I continue to speak, to question, to resist, and to refuse silence. Before I go further, I wish to acknowledge briefly, but with deep respect, the woman who is presenting this award to me today, Srimati Bipi Zohara. She is not an atheist. She does not reject religion as I do, and yet she has done what many self-proclaimed progressives never dare to do. She confronted Islamic fundamentalism openly, publicly, and at personal risk. When clerics insulted women who do not wear hijab, she responded not with apology, not with silence, but with defiance, removing the sari pallu from her head in front of the media, declaring that she would no longer submit her body to patriarchal religious dictates. She protested at Jantar Mantar for equal inheritance rights for Muslim women. She chose courage over comfort. Her presence here reminds us of an essential truth. Resistance is not owned by atheists alone. Resistance belongs to anyone who refuses submission. It belongs to those who place human dignity above religious command. I am honored to receive this award from her. I was born in a secular family. My father was a physician, a man trained in science, a man who believed that diseases have causes, not curses, that life is governed by laws, not divine whims. He never practiced religion. He never taught us to fear God. He taught us to ask questions. In our home, books mattered more than rituals. Music mattered more than prayers. Curiosity mattered more than obedience. My father believed education was the highest form of liberation. He encouraged his children to study, to think, to reason. He hoped we would become doctors. I became one. But medicine did not define my life. Truth did. Our home was alive with literature and art. My eldest brother published a literary magazine, wrote poetry, and played the violin. My elder brother played the guitar. My sister sang songs with her harmonium. I tried to learn music, but I lacked talent. Instead, I found my instrument in words. Reading became my refuge. A book was always in my hand. People called me a bookworm. They were right. Books opened worlds that religions tried to close. Even while studying medicine, literature was my lifeline. After completing medical college, I published my first book of poems, then another, then another. My second poetry collection became widely popular. Editors of national newspapers sought me out, inviting me to write weekly columns. Although poetry was my first love, I accepted. Because prose allowed me to confront reality more directly. I wrote honestly. I wrote without compromise. I wrote about what I saw around me. Sexual harassment, misogyny, inequality, hypocrisy, violence against women. I wrote about women being told to endure, to sacrifice, to forgive, to remain silent. I wrote about women being blamed for their own oppression. I wrote about how religion trains women to accept injustice as virtue. I did not write to entertain. I wrote to expose. I criticized religious laws that brutalize women. I criticized customs that treat women as property. I criticized scriptures that glorify submission and call it morality. And for that, my books were banned. I wrote about flogging. I wrote about stoning. I wrote about acid attacks. I wrote about rape justified as punishment. I wrote about trafficking, sex slavery, child marriage. I wrote about societies where the birth of a girl is considered a curse, where mothers are punished for giving birth to daughters, where women's bodies are controlled, regulated, surveilled, punished. I wrote because I wanted women to see clearly and to refuse. I wrote because silence is patriarchy's greatest ally. Many women wrote to me, telling me my words changed how they thought, that they no longer accepted what they had been taught to accept, that they began to question, that they began to resist. But those same words enraged fundamentalists, because fundamentalism cannot survive scrutiny. Patriarchy cannot survive reason. Religion cannot tolerate equality. Truth is costly. In the 1990s, hundreds of thousands of Islamists marched through the streets of Bangladesh, not to demand education, not to demand health care, not to demand women's rights. They marched to demand my death. They burned my books publicly. They issued fatwas, religious death sentences. They placed a price on my head. They stormed newspaper offices. They threatened editors and publishers. They shouted that a woman who questions religions deserves to die. And what did the state do? Did it protect me? Did it defend freedom of expression? No. The state prosecuted me for hurting religious sentiments. I went into hiding. I lived with the certainty that I could be murdered at any moment. I survived only because feminists, human rights defenders, and democratic governments intervened. But survival came at a price: exile. I was forced to leave my country. I was denied the right to return. Some of my books remain banned. My crime was simple. I said aloud that religious scriptures are not eternal moral authorities, that they are incompatible with modern human rights, especially women's equal rights. For more than 3 decades, I have lived in exile. I was not allowed to see my mother as she lay dying. I was not allowed to see my father when he took his last breath. This is the price of truth in a religious society. The first victims of Islam are women. The second victims are religious minorities. This is not an option. This is how the system is designed. Islam does not begin by attacking outsiders. It begins by disciplining insiders. It begins by controlling women's bodies, silencing women's voices, regulating women's sexuality, and declaring women intellectually, morally, and logically inferior. A religion that teaches half of its followers to obey without question creates the perfect foundation for authoritarianism. Once obedience is normalized at home, cruelty becomes easy outside. Women are trained to submit. Men are trained to command. Minorities are trained to disappear. Religious minorities suffer because patriarchy has already succeeded. A system that denies equality to women will never grant equality to non-believers. A system that treats women as half human will treat minorities as less than human. That is why I speak about women first. Not because minorities do not suffer, but because women suffer earlier, deeper, and more systematically. Women live under religious law every day, inside marriage, inside family, inside their own bodies. Minorities encounter religious violence episodically. Women encounter it constantly. You cannot liberate minorities while women remain enslaved. You cannot defeat religious extremism while patriarchy remains sacred. You cannot fight fascism in the street while worshipping obedience at home. Those who tell me, why do you speak so much about women, do not understand power. Patriarchy is the training ground of tyranny. Religion perfects its cruelty on women first, quietly, legally, domestically, before unleashing it publicly on others. A faith that demands submission from women will always demand submission from society. A God that denies women equality will never protect human rights. And a religion that fears women's freedom will always fear freedom itself. That is why feminism is not a side issue. It is the front line. It is the first battlefield. And it is where religious authoritarianism must be defeated first. Every religious fundamentalism everywhere in the world treats women as inferior beings. Whether Muslim, Hindu, Christian, Jewish, or Buddhist, when religion becomes absolute, it always demands submission. It always fears dissent. It always resists equality. Every idea must be open to scrutiny. No belief deserves immunity because it is labeled sacred. Sacredness must never be a shield for injustice. Criticizing religion is not hatred. Criticizing religion is a moral necessity. Islam must not be exempt from the critical scrutiny that applies to all other religions. It must undergo an enlightenment process by questioning the inhuman, unequal, unscientific, and irrational aspects of the religion. Militant Muslims say, Taslima is not an atheist, she is anti-Islam. What does that mean? Must an atheist prove neutrality by remaining silent? They accuse me of focusing too much on Islam. My response is simple. Criticism must be proportionate to harm. The more a religion violates human rights, oppresses women, incites violence, and silences dissent, the more it must be challenged. Which religion's extremists terrorize the world today? Which religion murders writers, cartoonists, bloggers? Which religion enforces veiling, segregation, obedience? Which religion justifies death for apostasy? People say Islam is a religion of peace. I have not seen peace. I have seen forced marriages. I have seen silence to women. I have seen burned books. And yet, I continue. Naming reality is not hatred. Denying reality is cowardice. But let me say this clearly, especially before a rationalist audience. I stand with the oppressed always. I stand with Muslims oppressed by Israeli aggression. I also stand with Jewish oppressed by Hamas. I stand with Hindus persecuted in Bangladesh. I stand with Christians persecuted in Pakistan. I do not care what God you worship or whether you worship at all. If you are oppressed, I stand with you. But I will not remain silent about the system that oppresses you. Many ask me if I am influenced by Western feminism. No, I was influenced by suffering. When I was told I could not play outside because I was a girl, when I was told menstruation made me impure, when I was told to hide my body to protect male morality, when I was told obedience was my destiny, I did not need Simone de Beauvoir to know something was wrong. You do not need theory to feel injustice. You do not need philosophy to recognize cruelty. Feminism is not Western. Feminism is universal. Oppression is universal. Resistance is universal. If we want true equality, religion must be separated from the state. No woman can be free under religious law. Wherever religion controls law, women are second-class citizens. Where the state is secular, women have hope. This is not theory, this is fact. Look at countries governed by secular law, then look at countries governed by religious law. The difference is not kinder religion. The difference is secularism. The world is not divided between East and West. It is divided between reason and blind faith, between modernity and anti-modernism, between humanism and barbarism. Let me now speak, not in abstraction, but from the lived reality of my own country. For decades, religious minorities, especially Hindus, in Bangladesh have lived under fear. They have been attacked, their homes burned, their lands seized, their temples vandalized. Threats are issued not only by criminals, but by extremist groups who know that the state will often look away. This violence has a clear purpose: to make people leave, to empty land, to erase presence without declaring genocide. As a result, the Hindu population has been declining for decades, not because of free choice, but because fear is a powerful migratory force. Let us be honest. Hindus have not been safe under any political party. Protection has failed regardless of who ruled. When a state cannot protect its minorities, it forfeits its moral legitimacy. The problem is not belief. The problem is religion fused with power. When the Constitution is infused with religious identity, citizenship becomes unequal. Some are born full citizens, others are tolerated guests. That is not democracy. That is disguised theocracy. A secular state does not mean respecting all barbarism equally. Secularism means the state has nothing to do with religion. No favorites, no fear, no appeasement. Violence against minorities must be punished with exemplary severity, not because the victims are Hindus, but because they are citizens. Law must be blind, or it is not law. Extremism does not grow in a vacuum. It grows where indoctrination replaces education. When children are taught obedience instead of inquiry, faith instead of evidence, fear instead of ethics, society pays the price. A state has no business funding or privileging religious indoctrination. Education must be secular, scientific, and universal. We need schools that teach evolution, critical thinking, gender equality, and human rights. Prayer has never been proven to solve social problems. Science has. Hospitals work better than temples. Vaccines work better than blessings. Education works better than sermons. This does not mean banning belief. It means refusing to let belief govern public life. We cannot and should not ban holy books, but we must stop pretending that all verses are humane. Texts must be read critically. Passages that justify violence, misogyny, or hatred must be exposed, contextualized, and challenged. Young people are not afraid of questions. It is authority that fears them. No child is born religious. Religion is inherited before it is chosen. Facing a religious identity on a child before they are capable of consent is a moral violation of autonomy. Children must be allowed to grow, to think, to question, and to choose, including the choice to reject religion altogether. They must be taught that atheism exists, that humanism exists, that morality does not require gods. Atheism is a foundation. Humanism is what we build on it. Feminism, human rights, children's rights, animal rights, freedom of thought. I proudly call myself a humanist. Because peace will not come from prayer halls, peace will come from minds trained to think, hearts trained to empathize, and states courageous enough to separate power from superstition. I'm Bengali. My people once fought a war to build a secular state. That dream has been hijacked by extremists, but I still believe in young people who think freely, in women who refuse silence, in rationalists who challenge dogma. My story is not only my story, it is the story of countless women whose voices were crushed. By telling the truth, I wanted to give them strength to revolt. I lost my country. I lost my home. But I discovered something deeper. My home is not land. My home is not a passport. My home is the heart of every rationalist, every free thinker, every secularist, every humanist. Their solidarity is my shelter. Their courage is my country. I regret nothing. I will not retreat. Until my last breath, I will fight fundamentalism, extremism, intolerance. I will fight for freedom, equality, human dignity. Do not remain silent. Do not accept oppression in the name of religion, culture, or tradition. Speak, even if your voice shakes. Speak louder. Speak boldly. The future depends on reason, and reason depends on courage. Thank you very much. Thank you.
അടുത്തത് അവാർഡ് ദാനമാണ്. അവാർഡ് ദാനത്തിന് തസ്ലിമ നസ്രീൻ, ബിപി സുഹറ, അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് കെ എൻ അനിൽകുമാർ, ടി കെ ശക്തിധരൻ എന്നിവരെ ക്ഷണിക്കുന്നു. അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് കെ എൻ അനിൽകുമാർ. തസ്ലിമ നസ്രീന് പ്രശസ്തി പത്രം നൽകുന്നത് അഡ്വക്കേറ്റ് കെ എൻ അനിൽകുമാർ. അവാർഡ് തുക 1,00,000 രൂപ തസ്ലിമ നസ്രീൻ നൽകുന്നത് സംസ്ഥാന ജനറൽ സെക്രട്ടറി ടി കെ ശക്തിധരൻ.